Hey, you don't know me, but you probably do know that dragon Pokemon are historically some of the most powerful and coolest looking things of all time. It's no surprise that they are not only great for playthroughs, but also in the competitive scene. At least starting in Gen 3. But what if you only wanted to use dragons in your Pokemon playthrough? What if you made a Pokemon team with only dragons? Can I beat Pokemon Emerald with only dragons? Before we begin, let's go over the rules. First, I can only use dragon Pokemon during this playthrough. No other Pokemon are allowed unless it's for an HM that none of my Pokemon can learn. This didn't happen. Second, I will only be able to have one of each dragon Pokemon. This is so at the end of the run, I don't have a team entirely composed of Salamences, as cool as that would be. And last, I will also not be able to use any items in battle. Held items as well as items outside of battle are okay though. One last thing to note, I will be listing out each of the Pokemon that I use as I get them in-game, so feel free to predict my final team in the comments before I finish this run. With all that out of the way, let's begin the run. I hop out of the moving van, settle into my new home of Little Root Town, admire my orange GameCube for a moment, meet my neighbor Brendan, and suddenly the professor needs my help. He told me to reach into his bag and pull out a Pokemon to save him from the feral raccoon that was attacking him. This is where I got my first dragon, Trico. With him by my side, we pounded the Zigzagoon into a pulp and saved the professor. Professor Birch then took us back to his lab, where he let me keep my Trico, and I named him Drake, named after a wingless dragon with 4 limbs. Moving on, I met up with Brendan and beat up his Torchic with Drake, and now we're rivals. Nothing much happened during the next 2 routes, but I did pick up the TM for Bullet Seed and considered replacing Absorb with it, though I ultimately decided against that the health that I got back from Absorb would be better than the potential damage that Bullet Seed could bring, not to mention that Bullet Seed will sometimes miss. Moving on, I faced off against Roxanne, first gym leader. Her 2 Geodudes were absolutely no problem. They both were one-shot by Absorb, and then her Nose Pass came out. This is where the real fight began. First, the Nose Pass used Block, which did nothing because I only have 1 mod. I spammed Absorb, dealing decent damage to it. She hit a Rock Tomb for a huge chunk of my health, but luckily, the next 2 Rock Tombs missed. Soon enough, after burning through a berry and 2 potions, Roxanne ran out of healing items and gave up with a Pity Tackle and 1 less Absorb. The Rock Gym was defeated. Moving on, I went to Dewford Island and caught my second dragon, a Magikarp I named Serpent, named after the sea dragon. I then delivered a letter to Steven Stone, then I backtracked and got the EXP share that Serpent can just have until he evolves. Then I challenged Brawly, the fighting type gym leader. This fight was much more difficult. First was his Machop, which opened with a massive Karate Chop crit that took out half of Drake's health. Luckily, he went down soon afterwards. His Meditite was much easier, only spamming Focus Punch, which gave me an opportunity to take back some of my lost health with Absorb. Unfortunately, it set up a light screen before it went down, so when he sent out his Makuhita, it took me out in a couple of throws. On my second try, I ended up much closer to winning. After a rougher Machop battle and a much better Meditite fight, where it didn't put up a light screen before it died, Makuhita was sent out again. I tried using Quick Attack into an Absorb, but Makuhita was able to tank my hits fairly well. Afterwards, it bulked up a couple of times and ended me with some vital throws. Such low health too. I still think that I could solo with Drake, I just need a couple more levels. Worst case scenario, I just evolve Serpent. At level 23, I tried again, and this time it was much better. Brawly's Machop didn't do much damage, and his Meditite was just as useless as ever. Then, when his Makuhita went out, I landed a Screech, which harshly dropped his defense. This allowed my Quick Attack to deal half his health, though it did get healed back thanks to his berry. The yellow Sumo Wrestler then bulked up to get back its defense when my next Quick Attack was a crit. Thanks to that, he barely had any health left, so with 1 more Quick Attack, I won and the fighting gym was beaten. Moving on, I got to the 3rd fight with my rival, Brendan. This took me 3 tries. On the 3rd one, I got a Quick Attack crit and one-shot his Wingull. Then, when he sent out his combustion, I hit a Screech to harshly lowered its defense, as it did a Focus Energy. Drake hit 3 times with Quick Attack to knock it out, but it also brought Drake to red health. Luckily, the Ludicolo that followed afterwards couldn't do much, and just like its brethren, it fell too. That was really close. As I made my way to the next gym leader, Serpent evolved. He is now a Gyarados. Fortunately, he won't be much help in this gym, though even if that wasn't the case, Gyarados is still very awkward to use as you learn basically nothing good until you find a water move. At Watson's gym, my first attempt ended very poorly. Voltorb and Electrike were both one-shots with Leaf Blade, but then came out as Magneton. I crit with another Leaf Blade which dropped him all the way to red health, but unfortunately, the 3-headed Cyclops survived. He landed a Thunder Wave, paralyzing Drake in the process, and because of that paralysis, Drake couldn't get anything done, and Magneton whittled him away after being healed. On the second try, however, things were a lot smoother. Instead of dropping to red health, the Magneton was just short as it Thunder Waved Drake. Thanks to that, and to the Drake pushing through the paralysis, I was able to finish it off. And then the Manectric that followed was one-shot thanks to a crit. I honestly thought that fight would be much harder. That Magneton is a lot easier when you're over-leveled, I guess. Moving on, I stopped by Route 113 to catch my next 2 dragons. First, I caught a Swadloon and named her Cockatrice, and then a Seviper who I named Worm. Next, I went to Mount Coronet to fight Maxie. He's trying to use a meteorite to blow up the volcano or something, so I gotta put a stop to that. First, I used Serpent to take out his Mightyena. Next was his Zupant, which caused Serpent to drop to red health thanks to his confusion hacks. I then ended up having to use Worm and Cockatrice to take that one out. Finally was his Camerupt, which I sent Serpent back out to face him. I used Dragon Rage and brought him to about half health, and then he tackled me, which only did 4 damage to me, so with one last Dragon Rage, I won. Moving on, I then went to Lava Ridge Town and fought Flannery, the Fire-type gym leader. First up was Zernummel, who I had Cockatrice use Sing on, but then she went down after a takedown and an overheat, so I switched to Serpent, who used Dragon Rage for the win. Next was her Slugma, which I swapped into Worm to deal with. After a couple Poison Tails, he knocked out the Lava Mollusk, and now who has 9 health left. Ouch. Next was her Camerupt, which I brought Serpent back out for. It used Dragon Rage, which takes out half of its health, but then it used Attract, which caused Serpent to simp for 2 turns. It doesn't really matter, because all it did in that time was tackle and set up a sunny day. Last was her Torpal, but when I swapped Serpent into Poison Tail, the turtle was faster than the snake in this case, so Serpent was brought back out. I hit another Dragon Rage as it goes for a Body Slam, which didn't paralyze, meaning that all that was left was to Dragon Rage again, giving me the victory. I honestly did not expect to win that easily, especially considering I didn't have any super effective moves on my Pokemon. Hopefully Norman can show me what our difficult fight looks like. While grinding for the normal gym, I ran into a Trapinch. It isn't a Pokemon, in that I can catch for this challenge, but I had a suspicion some of y'all would ask if I did catch it. Anyway, moving on to the 4th gym, I faced off against my dad. He leads with a Spinda, and I led with Cockatrice. I start using Peck as the Drunken Fist monk confuses me with a Teeter Dance. I keep going for it as it goes to Teeter Dance again, which I can only assume caused my dragon to have its status reversed. Too bad she didn't last much longer, so instead I sent out Serpent, who finished it off with a Dragon Rage. Next was Vigoroth, who I sent Drake out against, and after some Leaf Blades and Facades, the Sloth was dead. Next was his Linoon, who I sent Serpent back out against. I Dragon Raged once, and then he belly drummed back into red health, both before healing back up with a Hyper Potion. This is a bit scary now. I go for another Dragon Rage when the super stretched out raccoon hits me with a headbutt, dropping Serpent all the way to red health. Luckily, I was able to take it out before I could rampage my team any further. Last was his Slacking, which I brought Worm out against. I wasn't sure if Worm would outspeed the giant oak, so I first used Glare so that he was paralyzed. Thankfully, he tried to hit me with a counter instead of going for a Facade, which would have done devastating double damage to my boy. After stalling his loafing turn, I then started spamming Dig, a move that attacks the next turn while also making you invincible on the first one. Thanks to that, I was able to never take a hit from the slacking, and with that, the normal gym was beaten. Afterwards, I am given the Surf HM for free, so I slapped that on Serpent, and now he finally has a good move that works off of his poor special attack. Awesome. Moving on, I saved a Weather Institute from Team Aqua, Drake evolved into Sceptile, and the scientists there rewarded me with a cast form. But I can't use cast form as it is a gray, disheveled looking thing. So I sent it to a good farm where it will spend its time chasing butterflies and rolling in the grass. Then I fought my rival again. The Pelipper was annoying, who took out cockatrice, but Worm finished off this oversized bird. Next was Combustion, and which Serpent surfed over with ease, and last with his Wombre, which I sent Worm back out for. Significantly easier this time. Next, I went to a nearby river to catch a fish, specifically a Feebas, my next dragon. Now, if you didn't know, Feebas is a Pokemon with one of the most confounding methods to find it. It shows up exclusively in the river right outside where the Weather Institute is, on 4 specific tiles. Not only that, but these tiles are randomly generated each time you start a new save on Pokemon Emerald, and it's based off of your trainer ID, as well as the first Doofer trend of all things. Luckily, people much smarter than me have figured out how it's determined and have made a calculator for everyone to use for Feebas catching purposes. I'll provide a link in the description so that you can check it out if you want. I caught my Feebas and named her Quetzalcoatl because Quetzalcoatl didn't fit in the character limit, naming her after the limbless dragon with wings. What, didn't you know? The long red things that Milotic has on its head are wings. Now, I can't evolve her into Milotic yet, which is a whole nother can of worms that I'll get into later. So I move on to the next gym. At the next gym, I challenged the Flying-type specialist Winona. First, I dueled her bird with Cockatrice, and then after 2 takedowns, it went out. Next was her Tropius, which I sent Worm into through one shot thanks to a crit. Next was her Haltaria, who I switched Serpent in on. After 3 Dragon Rages, she went down as well. Did get 1 Dragon Dance off, but thanks to Serpent intimidating on switch in, it was only at base attack. Next was Pelipper, who I sent Worm back in on, and after messing around with Protect and Supersonic, Worm managed to beat it. Last was her Skarmory, which I sent Serpent back out for, and I won after hitting Serpent twice. Clean fight. Shortly afterwards, Cockatrice evolved into an Altaria, so that's cool. So, remember how I mentioned that I couldn't evolve Quetzalcoatl yet? Well, as it turns out, that was false. I can't ever evolve Quetzalcoatl. This is because in order to evolve a Feebas into a Milotic, you have to give it enough Pokeblocks to max out its beauty stat. A stat that's only used for the context mini-game. However, if you just so happen to have a Feebas with an impish nature, that will make it dislike Pokeblocks that increase beauty, making it even harder. Guess who just so happens to have an impish nature? So, after sending Quetzalcoatl to join the cast form out at the farm, I caught another Feebas and named this one Amphitheater, named after a different type of winged dragon. I then went back to Lily Cove City and did the Pokeblocks making minigame, which not only requires your own berries to make, but also must be done with at least 1 partner, which left me with various NPCs who always end up skewing the Pokeblocks in flavors that I didn't want. However, after going through this whole ordeal, I found out with the berries I had, I still couldn't get my Feebas to max beauty level. So, I went back to that route and caught a Feebas until I finally got one that had a nature that would give me a bonus to dry flavored food, which just so happens to raise beauty stats. This took me way longer than it should simply because God hates me. I got every single nature that hates the dry flavor, 3 hardy natures in a row, 4 separate instances of impish natures, and a bashful nature which has both the preference and the dislike of a dry flavor, meaning that it rounds itself out. Eventually, the 34th Feebas that I fished up was finally of a mild nature, meaning I could finally make Pokeblocks. However, there was one other problem. I wasn't sure if I could get good enough Pokeblocks to actually maximize my new Amphithier's beauty stat. So, I collected every berry I could find without cut, and then started farming them all. After a real-life day of farming, I then blended my berries up into Pokeblocks for one last time. I then fed them all to Amphitheater, and after using the EXP share to gain level, I finally had a Milotic. With my new team member in hand, I moved on to raid Team Magma's Volcano hideout. There I fought Maxi, the director. First he led with his Mightyena, who I had Serpent take care of, and then next he sent in his Camerupt, which I swapped to Amphitheater to make a satisfying one-shot with Surf. Last was Crobat, who I sent Cockatrice in, but she ended up fainting due to Maxi using super potions and missing a fly. So, I sent Worm in to finish it off. That didn't stop Maxi from trying to use Groudon though. Now there's a giant lizard kaiju rolling around. Yeah, sure, it'll be fine. After that I raided Team Aqua's hideout, but their captain, Archie, ran away, so I decided to go to Moss Deep City. After I arrived, I made a detour all the way to Route 132 to fish up a horse seed. I caught one and named him Kirin, after the Chinese horse dragon. I then evolve him into a Seadra, but right now I can't evolve him into a Kingdra because I need him to hold a dragon scale, but I'll get back to that later. I then faced off against Tate and Liza, the psychic duo gym leaders. I led with Kirin and Amphitheater. Kirin died immediately to a psychic, so I sent in Serpent. From there, I spammed Surf until Amphitheater was taken out by their Claydol, while Satu set up a sunny day. I then set in Cockatrice, who then died soon after, so finally, I sent in Drake to clean up the rest of Tate and Liza's team. Then immediately was a multi-battle against Maxie and Tabitha with Steven Stone by my side, but there I just spammed Surf with Serpent. No trouble. With Maxi defeated, he suddenly gets a change in heart, and I get the Hive TM from Steven. So, that allows me to fight Captain Archie once more. Archie led with his own Mightyena, but a few serfs from Amphitheater took the Pharaoh Beast out. Next was his Crobat, whom I switched Serpent out to deal with. A few hits from Hidden Power Flying was enough to take it out, but my guy nearly died to some Confusion shenanigans. Lastly was his Sharpedo, but I simply swapped in Drake, who took it out with a single Leaf Blade. The defeat didn't deter Archie though, so he decided to bring out the end of the world. Now Groudon and Kyogre are fighting in Sutopolis City, and no one knows what to do! Luckily, Steven is a guy who knows a guy.
Let's just say, I know a guy who knows a guy who knows another guy.
Eventually, I'm told by a flamboyant man hanging out in the cave that I'll need to find a Rayquaza and Sky Pillar? So I traveled over to Sky Pillar and summoned this weird flying green snake thing, which apparently made Groudon and Kyogre retreat to their respective domains, so all is well, I guess. Anyhow, now that the villain plot has been wrapped up, I decided to challenge Juan, the final gym leader. I led with Drake and decimated his Love Disc. Next was his Celio, and I just barely didn't kill the depressed Lard. Due to that, he hits me with a couple of Aurora beams, bringing Drake down to red health. So when his Kingdra was sent out, he just hits me with an Ice Beam, and then proceeds to stall out almost my entire team, leaving just Kirin and Worm, who both get swept by his Wish Cache. That was rough. Later, after fighting some Water Drought trainers and exploring a shipwreck, I faced him again, and this time I swept through his entire team, taking his Kingdra out with a crit, meaning that the Water Gym was defeated. Isn't it wonderful when the bullshit RNG works in your favor? That's what you get, you fucking fraud. Now then, with all 8 gym badges on me, I could finally make my way through Victory Road, challenge the Elite Four, and lastly, beat the champion. Though I decided to make one last detour to Meteorite Falls. There I searched deep inside the caverns and caught a Bagon. I name her Dragon, because out of all my Pokemon, and fully evolved, she will be the true embodiment of Dragonkind. Now with this last addition, I have to make a decision. Which Pokemon am I boxing? I already knew that under no circumstances I was getting Drake because he's my starter, and Amphitheater because she took me so fucking long to get that I'm not going to put all that time to waste. I also wasn't going to sack Serpent because he's one of the best mons in general, even if he's a bit limited to the game's mechanics. That leaves Worm, Cockatrice, and Kieran. Now Worm you might be your first pick to remove, but he does actually provide not only unique typing and pure poison, but also is my only option for any status moves, as well as having unique options with his move pool. Plus, he has Crunch, which is one of my only options for super effective hits on the upcoming Ghost Specialist. Cockatrice might also be something you'd consider booting, being that she has the complete type overlap with Salamence. However, I think that having a Diet Salamence just in case has a reasonable amount of merit. Which leaves us with Kieran. And honestly, once I did a bit of research, he was my definite pick for removal. His moveset was just pathetic, only having typical water moves, Ice Beam / Blizzard, and normals with nothing else to use. Yeah, he gets Dragon Dance, but he's not going to use it for much other than to get a speed boost. And lastly, the only dragon move a Kingdra can get outside of breeding is Twister, which is only base 40 power. All in all, he's just competing for the same niche as Milotic, and I already said I'm not getting rid of Amphitheater. Though, just ditching him right now didn't feel quite right, so I decided to give him one last hurrah before keeping him in my PC forever. I trained him up and evolved him using completely legal methods, and then faced off against Wally in Victory Road. Now, Wally took me 3 tries. On his first one, his Delcatty hit a Dragon Breath thanks to using Assist, which paralyzed Kieran, which then ruined the rest of the battle. Skipping to the third battle, first was his Altaria, which Kieran one-shot with Ice Beam. Next was his Delcatty, who I set a Brain Trance on to proc Swift Swim, and to give a boost to Kieran's Surf, as Wally, his pampered princess, missed a Screech while using Assist. Thanks to that, Delcatty and the following Magneton were both one-shots as well. His Roselia survived an Ice Beam, but it only did 28 damage thanks to Giga Drain, opening things up for another Ice Beam to take it out. And last was Wally's Gardevoir, right when the rain went out. Knowing that I'll lose my speed advantage against Wally's childhood best friend, and that she will always open the Future Sight, Kieran danced for rain again, and sent a Surf F at a Gardevoir. But unfortunately, Wally must have taken some pointers from Juan because his Gardevoir started using Double Team, meaning that the next Surf that Kieran did missed, right as his Gardevoir hit the Psychic Future Sight Wombo combo, bringing Kieran to 8 health. Luckily though, Kieran managed to pull through and land his next Surf, winning me the battle. Good job, my majestic Horse King. Have fun alone in the PC now. Now with all that out of the way, I made my way through Victory Road, leveled up my Pokemon one last time to 55 using completely legal methods. And before I finish, here are my team's stats and movesets. And now, it was time to face the Elite Four. First was Dark Specialist Sydney. He was very easy. Dragon took down his Mightyena, Drake sliced his Absolup, Worm poison bombed his Shiftry and Cacturne, and lastly, Drake finished off his Groudon. Next was Ghost Specialist Phoebe. She led with a Dusclops, so I led with Worm. She protects, then on my second turn, Worm lands a Crunch dealing good damage. Then the next turn, I expected another Protect, so Worm glared, which ended up not affecting Dusclops for some reason. This allowed the Ghost to confuse Ray Worm, but it didn't matter. He died a second time next turn. Then, she sent out her Bandette, who I sent Dragon out to deal with, and next was her second Dusclops, whom I sent Worm back out, but then the Floating Mummy used Earthquake, wrecking him. So, I sent Amphitheater back out to surf away the Dusclops and the falling Bandette. Last was her Sableye, who survived Surf and started double teaming. I didn't want to deal with that, so I swapped Dragon back in to Aerial Ace it. Third was Ice Specialist Glacia. She led with her Searleo, and I led with Drake. Drake one-shots it with a Leaf Blade, and then came her second cereal. But this one didn't fare much better either, but it did set up a hail. Next was her Walrein. Drake did massive damage with Leaf Blade, tanks an Ice Beam, and then lives on a sliver of health after hail chip damage. But then, Drake didn't hear no bell, so he finished off the Walrein with another Leaf Blade. Last was her other two Laileys, who were both taken out by Serpent. Finally was fellow dragon specialist, Drake.
Finally, a worthy opponent. Our battle will be legendary!
Drake led with his Shogun and I with Cockatrice, to give her some time in the spotlight. She dragon dances as he protects and uses Dragon Breath to nearly one-shot the thing, and paralyzing it as well. Unfortunately, it landed a Rock Tomb, slowing my Mon down, so I used another Dragon Dance as Drake healed his dragon. A Dragon Breath again, but once again it gets paralyzed while living on low health. Thinking he'd heal again, Cockatrice Dragon Dances, but luckily, she dodges the next Rock Tomb. After finishing off his Shogun, next came out his own Altaria, which gets knocked down with a fly to double edge combo. Next came out his Flygon, which... Wait a minute. Wait, that's not a dragon. I mean, it's a dragon type, but it's a giant flying bug. Am I really the only egg specialist? Anyway, he takes out Cockatrice with an Ice Beam, but not after taking big damage from a Dragon Breath. So I sent out Amphitheater, who Ice Beams itself, for the knockout. Then was his Kingdra, who I sent Drake to deal with two Dragon Claws, and all that was left was Drake's Salamence. So I decided to deal with his pseudo-legendary with my own pseudo-legendary. We both intimidate each other upon switching in, and the dragon hits a Dragon Breath on his Salamence, bringing down to about a little less than half his health. Then, Drake's Salamence uses Dragon Claw, nearly taking out Dragon. Luckily, Dragon pulls through and takes Salamence out with a crit, ending the penultimate challenge. Last was the champion Wallace. He led with his Whale Lord, and I with Drake. Drake nearly one-shots the big blimp, but he lives to set up Rain Dance. After a heal, a return, and another Leaf Blade, it fell. Next was Wallace's Milotic, who was a bit of a pain. She tanked a Leaf Blade, and then toxicked Drake, putting him on a timer. Drake couldn't quite out-damage the healing it was making with Recover, but eventually it uses Ice Beam, which gave Drake a window where he just barely lived at 13 health combined with the toxic damage. With the stars aligned, Drake finished off Milotic with one last Leaf Blade. Next was his Tentacruel, who I sent Worm out to deal with. Squidward uses Hydro Pump, which hits like a truck, but thankfully, Worm hits harder with Earthquake. Then Wallace sent out his Gyarados, so I sent in Serpent. We both intimidated each other, and then we Dragon Danced the attack drop off. Serpent Dragon Dance again while his Gyarados went for a Surf, which barely did any damage. I then kindly showed him what a real stab move looks like. It didn't last long after that. Next was his Ludicolo, who I had Drake deal with, and last was his Wishcash, who Amphitheater eventually dealt with thanks to some Hydro Pumps and Ice Beams. With that, I became the new champion, winning me the game. So, can I beat Pokemon Emerald with only dragons? Yes! This was a pretty fun challenge. If you want to do this kind of challenge on your own, I'd highly recommend it. Regardless, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment, and share with your friends. It'd really help out a first-time YouTuber like me. Feel free to leave any ideas you have for future videos, though I won't be doing any Nuzlockes until I get a good amount of subscribers. Until then, I'm the Corruptest, and I'll see y'all next time.